novices and the seasoned worker alike, with lore and practices that carry the power of the past to the need of the present. It is a literary crossroads where old-style conjure meets new-style life, and magic continues to reach those in need, the worker who works it. But for this gift to have the blessings of integrity as it is given, the story of Conjure's arrival in North America and the legacy of the African people who laid its foundations with their traditions, and yes, their lives, must be acknowledged and honored. This is a core aspect of the ways of traditional, cultural, and folkloric magic, and Starr makes this clear in this book. The worth of the conjuring tradition has many wonderful implications. On one hand, the recipes and practices Starr provides really work. I should know. I have applied works I've learned from Starr, and their effectiveness was irrefutable. But there's a deeper, more sacred virtue in how she delivers the traditional wisdoms of the practice. You see, while the work is addressing practical needs, it is also increasing the power of the worker or their client to achieve the ultimate expression of free will, choice over the shape of their destiny. Magic as a gift from the Creator, then applied by the worker, is an act of empowered choice to become a self-created being with a conscious power to choose one's destiny, a sacred core component imbued in humanity by God. Magic, in my view, is the clearest expression of the biblical concept that we were made in God's image. Magic involves an interactive relationship with the creator force through the agency of prayer, incantation, ritual, gathered magical force, and the list of forms of magical practice goes on. So, what does magic, specifically folk magic and the variant known as conjure, look like in the multifaceted subcultures of the United States? Well, Starr Casas has invited all of us into what she terms the culture of conjure, which includes a collective of lore, practices, and prayers passed on to her through family tradition, mentoring by elders, and an astute observation of practitioners, as she was honed and tested during the early phases of her life. But where does the body of this conjure tradition fit into the magical landscape of our country? The United States is a hotbed of diverse folk magical traditions from many countries and cultures that made their way to its soil through colonization, migration, and the African slave trade of the 1700s and 1800s, to name some of the largest sources. But these influences were hardly the root of magic in the Americas, as that was already thousands of years deep in the soil of this land and flourishing, cultivated by the many indigenous tribes, at least until colonization aggressively sought their land, killed their people, and progressively eradicated many native peoples and their magical wisdom forever. We will never know the sacred, powerful, and much-needed magical knowledge that was lost. Still, some of the teachings and practices were preserved in the body of conjure practices as freed African slaves and Native Americans encountered one another and shared their treasured wisdoms in the petri dish of oppression. Later, in its journey through the Emancipation and Reconstruction period, the body of conjure grew fatter with practices, as it encountered poor, marginalized, or oppressed ethnic communities in rural and urban areas alike. Here in the so-called New World, many of the migrated practices remained intact or were able to grow and adapt as they were influenced by the changing economic, social, and government environment and came in contact with other oppressed or marginalized groups, magic workers, and healers. If one were to identify the single event in North American history that infused it with a mass of magical information from another place, it would be the African slave trade. There are many factors that supported the preservation and continuation of conjure and other magical traditions, and one of the most effective was its ability to change its shape without altering its soul. Conjure as a folk magic practice does not use initiatory ceremonies, like some of the other African-influenced or diasporic traditions. Transmission of lore and practices to students or next generations of practitioners usually happens within families or, when necessary, through apprenticeship with hand-selected inheritors. Though conjure is very African-influenced and its practice more prevalent in the African-American community and under other names that may include rootwork and hoodoo, it is also found in white and other families, depending on the